I was sitting in my lawyer's office, pen hovering over the divorce papers, when I saw the number, $5 million. My husband was offering me $5 million to sign immediately, to walk away from our 29-year marriage without questions, without negotiation, without looking back. The leather chair felt cold against my skin, despite the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the Mont Blanc pen he had given me for our 15th anniversary. The same pen I used to sign our mortgage, our business contracts, our children's school enrollment forms, everything we built together, and now this. I remember the exact taste in my mouth in that moment, metallic and bitter, like I had bitten into aluminum foil. I remember how the paper felt under my fingertips, expensive linen stock, cream-colored, embossed with the law firm's name in raised letters that my thumb kept tracing over and over while my brain tried to process what was happening. My lawyer, Patricia, a woman I had known for 12 years, couldn't look me in the eye. She kept adjusting her reading glasses, shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling, clearing her throat in that way people do when they're about to deliver bad news, but don't know how to start. $5 million. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place, more than my parents made in their entire lifetimes combined, more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. And he was offering it to me like it was nothing, like it was a tip, like it was the price tag for erasing me from his life as quickly and cleanly as possible. But what they didn't know, what neither my husband nor his expensive legal team could possibly have anticipated, was what I would discover exactly 4 hours after I signed those papers. What I would find in a manila envelope that had been delivered to my home by mistake, meant for his personal assistant but sent to our house, the house I was about to leave forever. What I read in those medical documents would change everything, would transform my signature on those divorce papers from surrender into the opening move of the most devastating chess game of my life. Because when I saw those lab results, when I read the words stage 4, pancreatic cancer, metastatic, terminal, prognosis, 2 weeks maximum, something inside me that had been breaking finally shattered completely. And what emerged from those shards was not the broken, discarded wife he thought he had paid off. It was a woman who understood, with crystal clarity, exactly what he had done and exactly how to make him pay for every second of the 29 years I gave him. What I did in those final 2 weeks of his life didn't just destroy him. It destroyed the legacy he cared about more than he ever cared about me. And I watched every single moment of his realization, his horror, his complete and utter devastation, with the same cold satisfaction he must have felt when he calculated that $5 million was enough to buy my silence and my absence. Before I take you through every detail of how I dismantled everything he built on the foundation of my invisible labor and unconditional love, if you love stories of women who refuse to stay down, who turn their deepest pain into their most powerful weapon, subscribe right now and turn on all notifications. Because what I did next isn't in any self-help book about graceful divorce or moving on with dignity. This is about a woman who discovered she had been played, used, and discarded, and decided that the last chapter of his life would be written by the person he underestimated most. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is dedicated to stories of women over 45 who stopped asking for respect and started taking it, who stopped waiting for justice and started serving it. And I promise you won't want to miss what happens next in my story, or the dozens of other revenge sagas I share here every single week. Let me take you back to the beginning, to who I was before that afternoon in the lawyer's office, before the $5 million offer, before the medical records, before everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. My name is Catherine, though everyone except my mother called me Kathy, and I was 53 years old when my marriage ended. I had been with Richard since I was 24, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in finance and a job offer from Goldman Sachs that would have started me at $90,000 a year in 1995, which was significant money back then. I was smart, not just book smart, but sharp, analytical, the kind of person who could look at a balance sheet and see not just numbers but patterns, opportunities, risks that others missed. My professors told me I had a gift for it, that I could go far, that I should consider a PhD, consider consulting, consider starting my own firm someday. But then I met Richard at a friend's wedding. He was 32, already a junior partner at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, charming in that specific way that successful men in their 30s are charming when they've just started making real money and still remember what it was like to be broke. He pursued me with the single-minded focus that I would later recognize as the same intensity he brought to corporate acquisitions: flowers every week, handwritten notes, surprise weekend trips to bed, and breakfasts in Vermont. He told me I was brilliant, that I was beautiful, that I was the missing piece he had been searching for his whole life. And I believed him. God, I believed every word. When he asked me to marry him 6 months later, on a beach in Cape Cod with the sunset turning everything gold and pink, I said yes before he even finished the question. I was so in love I could barely breathe. I remember feeling like I was living in a movie, like I was the luckiest woman alive. We got married 3 months after that. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, and I wore my grandmother's wedding dress that my mother had saved for me in tissue paper for 23 years. I felt like a princess. I felt chosen. I felt seen. The job at Goldman Sachs? I turned it down. Richard convinced me it would be too stressful, too demanding, too incompatible with the family we were planning to start. He said his income was more than enough for both of us, that I deserved to relax after working so hard through school, that maybe I could do some freelance consulting from home, keep my skills sharp without the corporate pressure. It made sense at the time. I wanted children. I wanted a real marriage, not 2 ships passing in the night. I wanted to build something beautiful with this man I loved so completely it hurt. So I said yes to staying home, yes to being his support system, yes to being the woman behind the successful man. Our first daughter, Emily, was born 11 months after the wedding. Our second daughter, Sophie, came 18 months after that. And my life became a blur of diapers and bottles and preschool applications and pediatrician appointments and birthday parties and violin lessons and soccer games and PTA meetings. I was good at it. I was so good at it that everyone told me so constantly. The teachers loved me. The other mothers envied my organization skills. Richard's colleagues' wives asked me how I managed to keep everything running so smoothly while he traveled constantly for work, while he worked 70-hour weeks, while he built his career into something impressive. And I smiled and said it was teamwork, said we were partners, said I was happy to support his dreams because that's what marriage was about. But here's what I never said out loud, what I barely admitted to myself until it was far too late. I wasn't happy. I was useful. I wasn't fulfilled. I was functional. I wasn't building a life. I was maintaining his. Every morning I woke up at 5:30, before anyone else in the house stirred, and I made coffee in the expensive Italian espresso machine Richard insisted we needed because he had tasted real espresso in Milan once and couldn't go back to regular coffee. I made his breakfast exactly how he liked it. Egg white omelet with spinach and mushrooms, whole wheat toast dry because he was watching his cholesterol, fresh squeezed orange juice because the store-bought kind had too much sugar. I ironed his shirts even though we could afford a laundry service because he said the way I did it was better, the creases sharper, the collar more crisp. I packed his lunch in the Toomey leather lunch bag, carefully portioned, nutritionally balanced, because he said eating out was unhealthy and expensive. I managed his entire schedule, his dental appointments, his annual physical, his car maintenance, his dry cleaning pickup, his mother's birthday, his father's death anniversary, his colleagues' children's graduations. I was his personal assistant, his chef, his housekeeper, his social coordinator, his emotional support, his sexual outlet when he was in the mood, which became less and less frequent as the years went on. And I did it all without complaint, because I thought that was love. I thought sacrifice was the same as devotion. I thought invisible labor was noble. I thought making myself smaller so he could be bigger was what good wives did. The girls grew up. Emily got into Yale. Sophie got into Stanford. I was so proud I cried at both acceptance letters, and Richard took us out to celebrate at the most expensive restaurant in town, Morton's Steakhouse, where he ordered a $400 bottle of wine and toasted to their success, to their hard work, to their bright futures. He didn't mention the hundreds of hours I spent helping them with homework, the countless drafts of college essays I edited, the practice SAT tests I administered every Saturday morning for 6 months, the scholarship applications I researched and filled out, the financial aid forms I navigated. Their success was their hard work, his genetics, good parenting, plural, vague, shared, never specifically mine. Never acknowledged as the thousands of invisible hours I poured into shaping these 2 brilliant young women while he was traveling, networking, climbing, Both girls went off to college within 2 years of each other, and suddenly, the house was empty and quiet, and I was 51 years old, and I realized with creeping horror that I didn't know who I was anymore. 27 years of my life had been spent in service of other people's dreams, other people's schedules, other people's needs, and I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me what I wanted, what I needed, what I dreamed about late at night when I couldn't sleep. I tried to reconnect with Richard. I suggested we travel together, just the two of us. Maybe Europe, maybe Asia. All those places we said we would visit someday when we had time. He said he was too busy, that he was in the middle of crucial negotiations for a merger, that maybe next year. I suggested marriage counseling, gently, over dinner one night, saying maybe we had lost touch with each other, maybe we could rediscover what we had in the beginning. He looked at me like I was insane and said there was nothing wrong with our marriage, that I was being dramatic, that maybe I needed to find a hobby or volunteer work to fill my time now that the girls were gone. A hobby. 27 years of marriage, and he thought what I needed was a hobby. I tried to resurrect my career. I reached out to old colleagues, updated my resume, applied for financial consulting positions. But I was 51 with a 27-year gap in my work history, and every interview ended the same way: polite smiles, and we'll let you know, and then silence. The world had moved on without me. The finance industry I left had transformed completely. Everything was digital now, algorithmic, faster than I could comprehend. I was obsolete. I had made myself obsolete by choosing love over ambition, family over career, partnership over independence. And the worst part, the part that still makes my chest tight when I think about it, is that I didn't regret those choices at the time. I loved my daughters. I loved being their mother. I would make the same choice again if it meant raising them, knowing them, being present for their childhoods. But I needed Richard to see that choice, to honor it, to recognize that I had given up a potential lifetime of professional achievement and financial independence to build the foundation that allowed him to soar. I needed him to see me, really see me, the way he used to when we were young and I was the brilliant woman he was lucky to have. But he didn't see me. He looked right through me. I was part of the furniture in the house, familiar and functional and utterly unremarkable. Then came that Tuesday afternoon, October 15th, 2024. I remember the date because it was Sophie's 26th birthday, and I had spent the morning baking her favorite cake, red velvet with cream cheese frosting, even though she was in California and wouldn't eat it. I would freeze slices and mail them to her like I did every year, and she would text me a photo of herself eating it with a heart emoji. It was our tradition. Richard came home early from work, which was unusual. He was carrying his leather briefcase, the Mont Blanc one I had given him for his 50th birthday, and he looked tired, more than tired. He looked gray, older somehow, and I felt a flicker of concern. I asked him if he was feeling okay, if he wanted me to make him some tea, if he wanted to lie down. He said we needed to talk, and the way he said it made something in my stomach drop like a stone. We sat in the living room, on the cream-colored sofa we had bought together 15 years earlier from Ethan Allen, and he told me he wanted a divorce, just like that. No preamble, no build-up, no gentle leading into the topic. I want a divorce, Kathy. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it's time we both moved on with our lives. The room tilted. I remember gripping the arm of the sofa, my fingernails digging into the fabric, and asking him why, what had happened, what had I done wrong, could we work on it? And he said, and I will never forget the casual way he said this, like he was commenting on the weather. He said there was no one specific thing, that we had just grown apart, that we wanted different things, that he needed to focus on this next phase of his life and career without the obligations of marriage. Obligations. He called our 29-year marriage an obligation. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. I couldn't breathe properly. I asked if there was someone else, and he hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer, before he said no, not exactly. It's complicated, but this isn't about anyone else. This is about us, about him needing space to figure out what he wants. I started crying, ugly crying, the kind where you can't catch your breath and snot runs down your face and you don't care because the pain is so enormous it blocks out everything else. I begged him to reconsider, told him we could go to counseling, take a trip, renew our vows, anything. Please don't throw away 29 years. Please don't do this. And he looked at me with something that might have been pity, but felt more like disgust, and said, Kathy, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm prepared to be very generous. You'll be fine. I'll make sure you're taken care of. He was prepared to be generous, like I was a charity case, like I was a faithful employee being given a severance package. Not his wife, not his partner, not the mother of his children who gave up everything to build the life that gave him the freedom to become successful. A dependent he was obligated to support. That's when he told me about the $5 million. He had his lawyer draw up papers already, everything ready to go. Just needed my signature. $5 million in exchange for a quick, clean, uncontested divorce. No fighting over assets, no prolonged legal battle, no drama. Just sign and move on. He made it sound reasonable, generous even. $5 million was more than enough for me to start over, buy a house, live comfortably. I should be grateful. I should say thank you and sign. I didn't sign that day. I told him I needed time to think, to process, to talk to my own lawyer. He sighed, clearly frustrated, and said, fine, but don't take too long. We both want to move forward. Then he went upstairs to pack a bag. He was moving into a corporate apartment the company kept for visiting executives, just temporarily while we worked out the details. He was so calm, so organized, like he had been planning this for months, which, I realized later, he absolutely had been. I called Patricia that night, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me, and she fit me into her schedule the next morning. She reviewed Richard's offer, and I watched her eyebrows go up slightly when she saw the $5 million settlement. She said it was indeed very generous, more than I would likely get if we went to court, especially considering that most of our assets were in his name, tied to his company, difficult to divide. She asked if I was sure there wasn't infidelity involved, because this kind of offer usually meant he was trying to hide something or avoid something. I said I didn't know, that he denied it, but something felt wrong, felt off. She advised me to hire a private investigator before signing anything, to make sure I knew what I was agreeing to, but I was so tired, so broken, so humiliated, that I just wanted it over. I wanted to stop feeling this pain, this rejection, this complete annihilation of everything I thought my life was. So 2 weeks later, on October 29th, I went back to Patricia's office and I signed every page. Richard's lawyer was there via Zoom, efficient and professional, and Richard himself had sent his power of attorney, didn't even bother to show up in person. The whole thing took 40 minutes. 29 years of marriage, dissolved in 40 minutes of signatures and notarizations. Patricia gave me a copy of everything in a brown accordion folder, and I drove home in a daze, the folder sitting on my passenger seat like a tombstone. The $5 million would be wired to a new account Patricia had helped me set up within 5 business days. I was officially single, officially alone, officially erased from Richard's life as cleanly as if I had never existed. I got home around 3 in the afternoon, parked in the driveway of the house I would have to leave soon since it was in Richard's name, and part of the settlement was that I would vacate within 60 days. I sat in my car for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, maybe more, just staring at the front door, at the house where I raised my children, where I hosted countless dinner parties for Richard's colleagues, where I celebrated Christmases and birthdays and anniversaries, where I lived an entire adult life that had apparently meant nothing to the one person it was supposed to mean everything to. Then I saw the delivery truck pulling away, and there was a manila envelope on the front porch. A large manila envelope, the kind that holds documents with my address label on it, but a return address I didn't recognize. Some medical billing company I had never heard of. I picked it up, confused, and brought it inside. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail or a scam, but something made me open it. Maybe curiosity, maybe the universe, maybe God had a sense of ironic justice. Inside were medical records, lab reports, imaging studies, consultation notes, all for Richard Montgomery, my soon-to-be ex-husband, patient ID number, date of birth, social security number. This envelope was never supposed to come to me. It was supposed to go to his personal assistant at work, Linda, who handled all his personal affairs. But someone at the medical billing company had grabbed the wrong address from his file, the old home address instead of his office address. And because of that one clerical error, I now held in my hands the truth Richard had been so desperate to hide that he was willing to pay me $5 million to disappear immediately, without questions, without time to discover what he knew I would eventually discover if if I stayed in his life one day longer. The first page was a pathology report from Mass General Hospital dated September 23, 2024, 3 weeks before he asked me for a divorce. Pancreatic adenocarcinoma, stage 4, metastatic disease to liver and lungs. The next page was an oncology consultation note dated September 30th. Patient informed of diagnosis, prognosis grave. Given median survival of pancreatic cancer at this stage, patient likely has 8 to 12 weeks maximum. Patient declined aggressive treatment, opted for palliative care only. There were more pages, more test results, more doctor's notes, all painting the same picture. Richard was dying. Had been dying when he asked me for a divorce. Had known he had maybe 3 months to live, probably less. And his first priority was not to spend that time with me, not to reconcile, not to make peace, but to get rid of me as fast as possible. And I understood, in that moment of crystalline, horrifying clarity, exactly why. The $5 million seemed generous, seemed like enough money to set me up for life. But Richard was worth approximately $40 million. His stock options, his retirement accounts, his ownership stake in the pharmaceutical company, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios he had built over 29 years of marriage, community property state. If I was still married to him when he died, I would inherit everything, or at least half of everything, which would be $20 million, possibly more depending on how assets were structured. But if we were divorced, if I had signed away my claim to marital assets in exchange for a one-time settlement of $5 million, then everything else would go to whoever he designated as beneficiaries. And I knew exactly who that would be. Emily and Sophie, our daughters. Who would split $40 million instead of whatever was left after I got my half? He was buying me out of my daughter's inheritance with my own community property money. He was using $5 million of what should have been my $20 million to trick me into walking away, so the girls would get the full $40 million. He was dying, and his final act, his last priority, was to make absolutely certain that I got as little as possible while looking like the generous husband taking care of his ex-wife. The medical records fell from my hands and scattered across the kitchen floor, pages spreading out like accusation, and I laughed. I actually laughed, this horrible broken sound that turned into sobbing and then back into laughing because the cruelty was so pure, so perfectly calculated that I couldn't process it any other way. 29 years. 29 years of devotion, sacrifice, unconditional love and support. I gave him my youth, my career, my identity, my entire adult life. I raised his children, managed his household, facilitated his success in 10,000 invisible ways. And his final thought about me, his last consideration of our decades together, was how to legally cheat me out of what I was entitled to while making it look like generosity. I picked up the papers with shaking hands and read them again, carefully this time, looking at dates. The first symptoms he reported to his doctor were in early August: unexplained weight loss, back pain, jaundice. They ran tests throughout August and early September. He got the official diagnosis on September 23rd. He asked me for a divorce on October 15th, exactly 3 weeks later. 3 weeks to consult with lawyers, structure the settlement, create the narrative, plan the exit. 3 weeks to calculate exactly how to minimize my financial impact on his estate. He didn't waste a single day. Something inside me that had been soft and warm and hopeful for 53 years turned to ice in that moment. Not the ice that melts when you're kind to it, not the ice that cracks under pressure, but the kind that burns, the kind that preserves, the kind that lasts forever in the places where the sun never reaches. And I realized with perfect, terrible clarity that I had been playing a game I didn't even know existed, by rules that were designed specifically to keep me powerless, grateful, ignorant. That version of me, the Kathy who believed marriage was partnership, who thought love and sacrifice would be rewarded, who confused patience with virtue and silence with strength, she died right there on that kitchen floor, surrounded by medical records that proved she never mattered at all. And what rose up in her place was someone Richard should have been absolutely terrified of all along. Someone who had spent 29 years being underestimated, overlooked, treated as decorative and harmless. Someone who was actually brilliant, strategic, connected, and who now had nothing left to lose and 2 weeks to completely destroy everything he thought he had protected. Right here, I need to stop and talk to you directly, woman to woman, heart to heart. Have you ever given absolutely everything to people who treated you like you were nothing? Have you ever looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back because you poured all of yourself into others until there was nothing left of who you used to be? Have you ever felt that specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard, but from loving people who don't love you back, from sacrificing for people who take it as their right, from being invisible in your own life? If right now you're feeling that burning rage mixed with profound sadness because you know precisely what I'm talking about, because you've lived some version of this nightmare yourself, I want you to do something powerful for yourself right now. Write in the comments, "I choose myself from now on." Just those 6 words. This isn't just a comment on a YouTube video. This is your declaration to the universe, to yourself, to everyone who has taken you for granted, that you're done being treated as disposable. And when you write it, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping every other woman scrolling through here at 3 in the morning feeling invisible, feeling used, feeling like she's crazy for being hurt, who desperately needs to know she's not alone and that she has the power to change her story starting right now. Write it. I choose myself from now on. Thank you for trusting me with that declaration. Now, let me show you what happened when I finally chose myself. The first thing I did was absolutely nothing. I know that sounds anticlimactic, but it was the most strategic decision I could have made. I didn't call Richard screaming. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered. I took those medical records. I made copies of every single page. I put the originals in my safe deposit box at the bank, and I kept the copies in a locked drawer in my desk. Then I went about my life exactly as I had been before I knew. This was crucial. Richard needed to believe I was the same broken, compliant Kathy who had signed those papers in tears. He needed to think he had won, that his plan had worked perfectly, that I was too stupid or too devastated to question anything. For the next 3 days, I cried when he called to discuss logistics of me moving out. I asked him trembling questions about whether we could still be friends, whether he would visit me sometimes, whether this was really what he wanted. I made myself small and pathetic and devastated, and I could hear the relief in his voice, the satisfaction, the certainty that everything was going according to his plan. But while I was performing heartbroken wife on the phone, I was actually sitting at my computer doing something I hadn't done in 29 years. I was using my brain, my actual brain, the one that got me into graduate school with a full scholarship, the one that could analyze complex financial instruments, the one that could see patterns and opportunities and leverage points that other people missed, the one I had let atrophy for nearly 3 decades because being smart threatened fragile male egos, and I had chosen peace over power. That brain woke up now, and it was hungry. I started with the basics. I logged into every financial account we had ever shared. Richard had long ago removed my access to his primary accounts, the ones associated with his company's stock and executive compensation, saying it was too complicated for me to understand, that he handled all of that I should just focus on the household budget. But he had forgotten about some older accounts we set up when we were first married, a joint investment account at Vanguard that we seeded with $10,000 in 1996 and never touched again. He probably didn't even remember it existed, but I did, and I had the login credentials saved in an old password book from 2003. That account, untouched for 28 years with compound growth, was now worth $473,000. Joint account, equal access. I transferred every penny into my new personal account Patricia had set up. Then I went through old tax returns, every single year of our marriage, which I had meticulously filed and organized in the home office because Richard claimed he was too busy, and I started finding things. Deductions for a home office in Portsmouth that I didn't know we owned, rental income from properties in New Hampshire that were never mentioned in the divorce settlement, charitable contributions to organizations I had never heard of, thousands of dollars every year, investment losses that seemed improbably well-timed. I made notes. I cross-referenced. I built spreadsheets, and a picture started emerging of assets that Richard had very carefully hidden, structured, obscured. Not illegal, exactly, but deliberately kept off the books of our marriage. Money and property that should have been disclosed in the divorce settlement but weren't. I called Patricia and asked her, hypothetically, what would happen if I discovered after signing the divorce papers that my husband had failed to disclose significant assets. She got very quiet and then said if I could prove it, the settlement could potentially be challenged, possibly even voided on grounds of fraud. She asked if I had found something. I said maybe, I wasn't sure yet, I was just curious. Then I did something I should have done months earlier. I hired a private investigator, not the ones that advertise on billboards, but a real one, a woman named Sarah Chen, who came highly recommended by Patricia for divorce cases involving high net worth individuals. I met Sarah at a coffee shop in Cambridge, and I gave her everything. The medical records showing Richard had known he was dying, the divorce settlement showing the suspiciously fast timeline, the tax returns showing hidden assets, and I asked her to find out everything about Richard's life for the past year. Everything he had been hiding, every secret he thought would die with him. Sarah called me 4 days later. Her voice was shaking slightly when she said, "Mrs. Montgomery, you need to sit down for this. I'm sending you a file. It's encrypted. The password is your mother's maiden name. Don't open it anywhere that has cameras. Don't print it. Just look at it. And then we need to talk about what you want to do with this information." I opened that file in my car, parked in a grocery store parking lot at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and what I saw made everything click into place with sickening perfection. Richard had a girlfriend. Her name was Amanda Pierce, 34 years old, 19 years younger than me, worked in investor relations at his company. They had been together for 18 months, since March 2023, long before he got sick. There were photos of them together at restaurants, hotels, company retreats, his arm around her waist, kissing her at a wine bar in Newport, holding hands walking through Boston Common. But that wasn't the devastating part. The devastating part was the document Sarah had obtained from a source at his company, a life insurance policy Richard had taken out 6 months ago, in April 2024. $10 million policy, beneficiary, Amanda Pierce. Not his wife of 29 years, not his daughters, his girlfriend of 18 months, and there was more. An amendment to his will, dated September 30th, 2024, 1 week after his cancer diagnosis. The Portsmouth property I found on the tax returns, the rental properties in New Hampshire, a stock portfolio held in a private LLC, all of it, approximately $8 million in assets that were not disclosed in our divorce settlement, all of it bequeathed to Amanda Pierce. I sat in that car and I did the math. He was leaving Amanda Pierce $18 million between the life insurance and the hidden assets. He was leaving Emily and Sophie approximately $22 million from the disclosed estate and his company stock. And he was leaving me $5 million that was actually my own community property money that he was generously allowing me to keep in exchange for signing away my rights to the other $35 million. He was giving his mistress of 18 months more money than he was giving his wife of 29 years. A woman who had been with him for a rounding error of time was getting nearly 4 times what I was getting, and our daughters, the children I raised, would get their inheritance without ever knowing their father had stolen their mother's share to give to his girlfriend. I looked at those photos of Richard and Amanda, really looked at them. She was beautiful in that generic way that young women who work out obsessively and get regular Botox are beautiful. Blonde highlights, white teeth, designer dresses that showed off her yoga-toned body. In one photo, she was wearing a necklace I recognized, a diamond pendant from Tiffany, because I had seen the charge on our credit card statement 6 months ago. Richard told me it was a gift for his assistant Linda's retirement. He had looked me right in the eye and lied, and I had believed him because I always believed him. In another photo, they were on a beach somewhere tropical, both of them tan and laughing, and she was wearing a bikini that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The timestamp on that photo was July 4th weekend, 2024. The weekend Richard told me he had to go to a pharma conference in Chicago and couldn't join me and the girls at the Cape House. He wasn't in Chicago. He was in Turks and Caicos with her. While I was grilling hot dogs for our daughters and their friends, while I was doing the crossword puzzle alone on the porch, while I was sleeping alone in the bed we had shared for decades, he was on a beach with a woman young enough to be his daughter. Something crystallized in me then. This wasn't just about the money, although the money was significant. This was about being erased. This was about a man who had used me for 3 decades as free domestic labor, emotional support, social credibility, child rearing, household management, and was now, in his final act on this earth, trying to pretend I had never been important at all, trying to rewrite history so that his real love, his real priority, his true companion was this girl who showed up in the final chapter after I had already done all the work. He wanted to die with everyone thinking she was special, and I was just the ex-wife who got a generous settlement and should be grateful. No, absolutely not. I wasn't going to let him do that. I wasn't going to let him die believing he had gotten away with it. I wasn't going to let him leave this earth thinking he had protected Amanda and provided for his children and disposed of me neatly. I was going to make sure the last thing Richard Montgomery knew before he died was that I had destroyed everything he cared about more systematically and more thoroughly than his cancer ever could. I called Sarah and told her I needed more. I needed everything she could find on Amanda Pierce. Background, finances, family, secrets, vulnerabilities. I needed to know Richard's exact medical status, which hospitals he was going to, which doctors he was seeing. I needed copies of his amended will, documentation of the hidden assets, proof of the life insurance policy. Sarah said some of that might cross legal lines. I said I would pay whatever it cost, and I would take full responsibility. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Mrs. Montgomery, I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've seen a lot of men do terrible things to their wives. But this, what he did to you, this is one of the worst. I'll get you what you need." It took her 6 days. 6 days of me continuing to play the grieving, compliant wife. 6 days of me packing boxes like I was preparing to move out. 6 days of me answering Richard's occasional texts about logistics with sad little okay and whatever you think is best. 6 days of him thinking he was winning. On November 14th, Sarah delivered a thumb drive to my house. She wouldn't come inside, just handed it to me on the porch and said, "Everything's on there. Be careful. What you do with this information is up to you, but please, be very careful." I spent that entire night going through the files. Bank statements showing Amanda had been receiving monthly transfers from Richard of $10,000 for the past year. Text messages between them that Sarah had somehow obtained, I didn't ask how, where they discussed me in ways that made me want to vomit. Richard writing, "She's finally signing the papers tomorrow, thank God. I was worried she might dig deeper, but she's too broken to fight." Amanda responding, "Poor thing probably thinks you're being generous. When do we tell your daughters about us? Richard, after I'm gone. They don't need to know now. Let them remember me the way I want to be remembered. Let them think their mother and I just grew apart. Amanda, you're so thoughtful about protecting everyone's feelings, even hers. That's one of the things I love about you, protecting everyone's feelings." He was protecting his own legacy, his own image, his own comfort. There were emails to his lawyer discussing strategy for the divorce, with Richard writing, "The key is to make her feel like $5 million is generous enough that she won't question it. Emphasize that most divorces are messy and expensive. Make her feel lucky." There were medical records showing his cancer had actually been diagnosed earlier than the September date I had seen, showing he had known since August and had immediately started restructuring his estate. There were drafts of obituaries he had written for himself, 3 different versions, each one mentioning his loving daughters and his successful career and his charitable work. Not one mentioned me except in passing. Survived by ex-wife Catherine, ex-wife. Not partner of 29 years. Not mother of his children. Not the woman who built the foundation of everything he achieved. Ex-wife. A footnote, an afterthought, and there was a video that Sarah had gotten from someone at the company, taken at a corporate retreat in October, 2 weeks before Richard asked me for the divorce. Richard was drunk, laughing with colleagues, and someone asked him how married life was treating him. And he said, and I watched this video 12 times to make sure I heard him correctly, he said, "Marriage is great if you like having a live-in maid who thinks she's a partner. But seriously, Kathy's been a good sport about everything. She raised the kids, kept the house nice, never complained about my hours. She served her purpose. Now it's my time." Someone off camera laughed and said, "That's cold, man." And Richard shrugged and said, "It's practical. Everyone outgrows their starter wife eventually. You just have to be generous enough on the way out that she doesn't make a fuss." Starter wife. 29 years of marriage and I was his starter wife. A phase he was outgrowing. A purpose I had served. And being generous enough on the way out was paying me $5 million of my own money to disappear quietly while he left $18 million to his mistress and rewrote history to erase me. I sat there in my dark house at 4 a.m, watching that video on repeat, and I made a decision. Richard thought he had 2 weeks, maybe 3, to die peacefully, surrounded by people who thought he was a great man. He thought he had successfully hidden his betrayal, protected his girlfriend, secured his daughter's inheritance, and neutralized me as a threat. He thought his last chapter was written exactly how he wanted, but I was going to give him a very different ending. I was going to make sure that everyone, absolutely everyone who mattered, knew exactly who Richard Montgomery really was before he died. And I was going to do it in a way that he couldn't stop, couldn't fight, couldn't undo, because the only thing more powerful than money is truth. And I had all the truth I needed. If you're absolutely gripped by this story and you can't wait to see how I systematically dismantled everything Richard built on the foundation of my invisible labor and unconditional love, make sure you're subscribed to this channel with all notifications turned on, because every single week I share real stories of mature women who stopped playing nice and started playing smart. Women who turned their pain into power, their betrayal into triumph, their invisibility into influence. This channel is your reminder that being over 45 doesn't mean being invisible or powerless. It actually means having decades of wisdom that younger people can't match, patience that comes from experience, strategic thinking that's been refined by years of navigating complex situations, and a level of I don't give a damn what anyone thinks anymore that is absolutely liberating and terrifying to people who are used to controlling you. Every story I share here is about women who reached their breaking point and decided that breaking point would be everyone else's problem, not theirs. Women who stopped asking for respect and started demanding it. Women who realized they didn't need permission or approval to reclaim their lives. So subscribe right now, turn on that bell, because the women in this community don't just survive, we dominate. We don't just get even, we get ahead. And I'm about to show you exactly how I did it. But I promise you'll want to be here next week when I share the story of a 56-year-old grandmother who discovered her entire family had been planning for 2 years to put her in a nursing home so they could sell her house and split the money. And what she did when she found out will make my revenge look merciful. Hit that subscribe button now. My first move was to call Emily and Sophie. I hadn't told them about the divorce yet, because Richard asked me to wait until it was final, said it would be easier for them if we presented it as a done deal rather than a negotiation they might try to influence. I had agreed at the time because I was still in that phase of trying to accommodate his wishes, but now I called both my daughters, conference call, and I told them everything. I told them about the divorce, about the settlement, about my signature already on the papers. And then, my voice shaking but steady, I told them about the medical records. I told them their father was dying, that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, that he had weeks left, maybe days now. There was silence on the line, long, horrible silence. Then Sophie started crying, and Emily said, "Mom, are you sure? Could there be a mistake? Did you talk to him?" I said yes, I was sure. And no, I hadn't talked to him, because there was more they needed to know first. And then I told them about Amanda. I sent them the photos while we were on the phone. I sent them the text messages. I sent them the video from the corporate retreat. I sent them the documentation of the life insurance policy and the amended will. I sent them everything. And I listened to my daughters, these 2 brilliant, accomplished young women I raised to be strong and independent, and to never accept being treated as less than. I listened to them break down completely. Emily kept saying, "This can't be real. Dad wouldn't do this. There has to be an explanation." And Sophie just cried, these deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like she was being torn apart. I let them process. I let them rage and deny and bargain and grieve. And then I said, very quietly, I need you both to understand something. Your father used his death, his actual death, as a tool to cheat me out of what I was entitled to. He knew he was dying, and his priority was making sure I got as little as possible, while his girlfriend got $18 million. That's who your father is. That's what he chose to do with his final days on this earth. And now you both have a choice. You can pretend you don't know any of this. You can let him die thinking his secrets are safe, thinking his legacy is protected, thinking everyone still believes he was a good man. Or you can help me make sure he knows, before he dies, that everything he tried to hide has been exposed, that every lie has been revealed, that the people he cared about most know exactly who he was. Emily said, "Mom, what are you going to do?" And I said, I'm going to file an emergency motion to nullify the divorce settlement on grounds of fraud and material non-disclosure. I'm going to contest his will and the life insurance beneficiary designation. I'm going to make sure Amanda Pierce doesn't get a penny of money that should go to you and me. And I'm going to make sure your father spends his last days knowing that I won. There was a long pause. Then Emily said, her voice hard in a way I had never heard before, "Tell me what you need me to do." Sophie said, I'm flying home tonight. The girls arrived the next morning. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten thousands of meals as a family, where I had helped them with homework and listened to their problems and celebrated their victories. And we strategized. Emily, who had inherited my analytical mind and was now a corporate attorney at a firm in New York, reviewed all the documentation Sarah had provided. She made notes, cross-referenced dates, built a timeline. She said, Mom, this is definitely fraud. He had a legal obligation to disclose all assets in the divorce settlement, the hidden properties, the LLC, the offshore accounts. All of it should have been included. The fact that he deliberately concealed them to reduce your settlement is textbook fraud, and the timeline proves intent. He found out he was dying and immediately started restructuring everything to cut you out. We can absolutely challenge this. Sophie, who had my creative instincts and was working in marketing for a tech startup, said, but we need to do more than just legal action. We need to destroy his reputation. We need everyone who ever respected him to know what he did. His colleagues, his friends, the industry publications that write about successful pharmaceutical executives. We need to make sure his legacy is trash. I looked at my daughters, these fierce, angry, protective young women, and I felt simultaneously heartbroken that they had to learn this truth about their father, and incredibly proud that they were choosing to stand with me. We spent 3 days preparing. Emily filed an emergency motion in family court to set aside the divorce decree based on newly discovered evidence of fraud. She attached copies of the tax returns showing undisclosed assets, bank statements showing the transfers to Amanda, documentation of the properties Richard had hidden. The motion requested immediate freezing of all Richard's assets pending investigation and full forensic accounting of the marital estate. The court granted a hearing date for the following week. While Emily handled the legal strategy, Sophie and I handled the exposure strategy. We compiled a document, 23 pages long, with copies of everything. The medical records showing when Richard knew he was dying, the divorce timeline showing his speed to get rid of me, the photos of him with Amanda, the text messages planning their future, the video of him calling me his starter wife, the life insurance policy, the amended will, the hidden assets, everything. And Sophie designed a cover letter, perfectly professional, explaining that this document was being shared with select recipients because Catherine Montgomery believed the public record should reflect the truth about her former husband's character and actions. We sent it to Richard's CEO, his board of directors, the head of HR at his company, his 3 closest colleagues who had been at our wedding, the president of the industry association where Richard had served on the advisory board, the editor of the pharmaceutical industry journal that had named him Executive of the Year 2 years earlier, the director of the charity foundation where he was a major donor and board member. We sent it certified mail, signature required, to 15 people who respected Richard Montgomery and held him up as an example of success and integrity. We wanted to make absolutely sure every single one of them read it before Richard died, and we wanted Richard to know we had sent it. On November 20th, 5 days before Thanksgiving, with Richard now in home hospice care at the apartment he shared with Amanda, Emily and I visited him. We didn't call ahead, we just showed up. Amanda answered the door, and her face went white when she saw us. She tried to block us, but Emily said, "We're here to see our father. You can let us in, or we can make a scene in this hallway that your neighbors will never forget. Choose." She let us in. Richard was in the living room, propped up on pillows on the leather sofa we had picked out together 12 years earlier, the one that used to be in our family room before he moved out. He looked terrible. He had lost probably 30 pounds since I last saw him a month ago. His skin was yellow, jaundiced, paper thin over bones. His eyes were hollow. He was clearly in pain despite whatever medication they had him on. When he saw me, he actually flinched. He said, "Kathy, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I came to give you something." I handed him a copy of the 23-page document we had sent to his colleagues. I said, 15 people received this in the mail today. Your CEO read it this morning and called an emergency board meeting. You're being removed from all active projects, and your retirement will be listed as for health reasons with a note about conduct issues under investigation. The charity foundation asked for your resignation from the board, effective immediately. The Industry Journal is running a correction about your Executive of the Year award with quotes from anonymous sources about your character. Your friends know what you did. Your colleagues know what you did. Everyone you wanted to impress. Everyone whose respect you valued. They all know that you spent your last months on Earth cheating your wife out of her fair share to give millions to your mistress. They all know you called me your starter wife. They all know you thought $5 million was generous enough that I wouldn't ask questions. They all know exactly who you are. Richard tried to sit up, couldn't, fell back against the pillows. He looked at Amanda and croaked, "Get them out." She moved toward us, but Emily held up her phone and said, "I'm recording this. If you touch either of us, it goes viral." Amanda stopped. Richard's hands were shaking as he flipped through the pages. He saw the photos, the text messages, the medical records, the will, everything. His face went from yellow to gray to almost purple. He whispered, "You can't do this. This is private." And I leaned down close to him, so close I could smell the sickness on him, and I said, "You made it private by hiding it. I'm making it public by exposing it. You thought you could erase me from your life, from your legacy, from your story. You thought $5 million was enough to buy my silence and my absence. You were wrong. I'm not going anywhere. And when you die, and it won't be long now, everyone will remember you as the man who betrayed his wife of 29 years, who hid assets to cheat her, who left everything to his mistress. That's your legacy now. Not successful executive, not generous donor, not devoted father, cheater, liar, user. That's what people will say when they hear your name." Emily stepped forward and said, "And just so you know, we filed a motion to nullify the divorce settlement. Mom's going to get what she's legally entitled to, which is half of everything, including the assets you hid, and we're contesting your will and the insurance policy. Amanda isn't getting a penny. Every dollar you tried to give her is going to be tied up in litigation for years, and by the time it's resolved, she'll have spent more on lawyers than she would ever receive. You failed, Dad. You failed to protect her, and you failed to cut Mom out. All you did was show us who you really are." Sophie, who had been quiet until now, said, her voice breaking, "I used to be so proud to be your daughter. I used to tell people about you, about your success, about how hard you worked. I thought you were someone to admire, but you're just pathetic. You couldn't even be a good person when you were dying. That was your last chance to do something decent, something loving, something that would make us remember you with respect. And you used it to scheme and lie and betray the woman who gave you everything. I will never forgive you for what you did to Mom. Never." Richard's face crumpled. He started crying, these horrible, rasping sobs, and he reached out toward me and said, "Kathy, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. Please don't do this. Please." And I looked at this man I had loved for 29 years, this man I had built my entire adult life around, this man who had destroyed me so casually, so calculatedly, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, no anger, nothing. Just cold, clear emptiness where he used to live in my heart. I said, "I forgive you, Richard, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry you with me one more day. You're already dead to me. The actual dying is just a formality. Enjoy your last days with Amanda. I hope she's worth what it cost you." We left. Amanda followed us to the door, crying, saying, "You don't understand. We love each other. He was going to marry me. You're destroying everything." And Emily turned to her and said, "He was never going to marry you. You were a midlife crisis with a life insurance policy attached. If he actually loved you, he would have left his wife years ago when he was healthy and had a future. He kept you secret and separate because you were never the main event. You were the side piece who got greedy and is about to learn a very expensive lesson about estate law." We walked out of that building, and I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years, maybe decades. The next day, Richard's lawyer called Patricia to negotiate. Apparently, Richard was willing to redisclose all hidden assets and renegotiate the settlement if I would agree to some confidentiality about the circumstances. I said no, not confidential, public record, full disclosure, or we go to court and I subpoena every document, every email, every text message, and I make it national news. Your choice. It took 2 more days of back and forth, but eventually they agreed. New settlement, filed with the court, showing full accounting of all marital assets totaling $42 million. I received my half, $21 million, minus the $5 million already paid, so an additional $16 million transferred to my account. The hidden properties, the LLC, the offshore accounts, all of it disclosed, all of it divided. Richard's estate was reduced to his half, $21 million, which would be split between Emily and Sophie according to his will, after taxes and estate fees. Amanda's life insurance policy was contested by the daughters as beneficiaries, and after a week of legal pressure and the threat of a very public lawsuit, the insurance company agreed to pay the $10 million to Richard's estate instead of to Amanda directly, which meant it would be divided among legitimate heirs, which did not include her. Amanda Pierce walked away with nothing except the memory of a dying man who promised her millions and delivered scandal. Richard Montgomery died on December 3, 2024, 16 days after we confronted him. I did not attend his funeral. Emily and Sophie did, and they told me it was small, awkward, tense. Amanda was there, sitting in the back, crying. Richard's colleagues were there, visibly uncomfortable, giving minimal eulogies that praised his business acumen without mentioning his character. The CEO gave a 3-minute speech that was basically a list of his job titles and achievements, with no personal anecdotes. No one mentioned being inspired by him. No one mentioned missing him. No one mentioned his generosity or his kindness or his integrity, because everyone there knew the truth now. Everyone knew what he had done. His daughters spoke briefly about remembering the father he was when they were children, before they knew who he really was. They did not cry. The obituary that ran in the Boston Globe mentioned his career, his survivors, and, in a line his lawyer tried desperately to remove but couldn't, because Emily verified the facts with the newspaper, a note that he was predeceased by his marriage to Catherine Montgomery ended in divorce after 29 years. That phrase, predeceased by his marriage, was Sophie's idea, a reminder that he killed our marriage before his cancer killed him. If watching karma work through me gave you even a fraction of the satisfaction and vindication that it gave me to actually live it, to watch his face as he realized what I'd done, to see him finally understand that actions have consequences and you can't treat people like garbage forever without it coming back to destroy you, hit that like button right now. Every single like tells YouTube's algorithm to show this story to more women who desperately need to know that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story, it can actually be the beginning of your power. Women who need to see that you don't have to just forgive and forget and turn the other cheek when people destroy you. Like this video right now, because stories of women taking back their lives, standing up for themselves, and refusing to be victims need to be seen by everyone, especially young women who think they have to accept disrespect to keep the peace. Like it now. So where am I now? 8 months after Richard died. 8 months after I took back what was mine and destroyed the legacy he tried so hard to protect. I'm living in a beautiful condo in Boston, overlooking the harbor. 2 bedrooms so Emily and Sophie have their own rooms when they visit. I wake up every morning when my body wants to wake up, not because someone needs something from me. I have coffee on my balcony, and I watch the sunrise over the water, and I think about all the years I missed sunrises, because I was too busy making breakfast for someone who never said thank you. I'm consulting again, financial consulting, working with 3 small businesses helping them structure their growth strategies. I'm good at it. I forgot how good I am at this. My clients respect me, value my insights, pay me what I'm worth, and every invoice I send feels like reclaiming a piece of myself I lost decades ago. I joined a book club. I took a ceramics class. I started going to therapy, real therapy with a woman who specializes in complex trauma and rebuilding identity after long-term emotional abuse. I'm learning that I was abused, that what I experienced wasn't just a bad marriage, but systematic diminishment, exploitation, erasure. I'm learning that I'm allowed to be angry about it. I'm learning that choosing myself isn't selfish. It's survival. I have new friends, women my age who have their own stories of being underestimated, overlooked, used up, and expected to be grateful for it. We meet for dinner once a month, and we laugh about the absolute audacity of mediocre men who convinced brilliant women to make themselves small. We toast to second acts and reinvention and the particular freedom that comes from genuinely not giving a damn what anyone thinks anymore. Emily and Sophie call me twice a week. We're closer now than we were when they were growing up. They see me as a whole person now, not just as mom. They ask my advice about their careers, their relationships, their lives. They tell me I'm inspiring, that watching me fight back taught them something crucial about their own worth. They say they're proud of me. My daughters are proud of me. That means more than the money, more than the vindication, more than anything. As for Richard's legacy, it's exactly what I promised it would be. His name occasionally comes up in industry circles, usually with knowing looks and changed subjects. The company scrubbed his profile from their leadership history page. The charity foundation removed his name from the donor wall. The industry journal never did run that correction, but they also never mentioned him again in any context. He's been erased more thoroughly than he ever erased me, and unlike my erasure, which was unjust, his is exactly what he earned. Amanda Pierce. I heard through Sophie, who heard through a friend who still works at Richard's company. Amanda moved to Florida and works in real estate now. She tried to write a memoir about her relationship with Richard, tried to sell it as a tragic love story, but no publisher would touch it after Emily's lawyer sent a letter explaining that every factual claim would be aggressively challenged and any publisher would be included in litigation. The last I heard, she was posting inspirational quotes on Instagram about overcoming adversity and trusting the universe she trusted to give her $10 million. I don't think about Richard much anymore unless someone asks, like I'm doing now telling you this story. He's simply not relevant to my life. He made his choices. Those choices had consequences. I'm not responsible for protecting him from those consequences anymore. I'm busy living my life, finally, for the first time in decades, fully, authentically, powerfully, selfishly, in the best possible way. I wake up every day and I choose myself. I choose my peace. I choose my growth. I choose my healing. I choose my future. And that choice, that simple daily choice to prioritize myself after 53 years of prioritizing everyone else, has transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined when I was sobbing in Patricia's office signing those divorce papers 8 months ago. And now I need to talk directly to you, to the woman watching this right now who sees herself in some part of my story. Listen to me carefully. You've spent how many years, maybe decades, putting everyone else's needs before yours? How many years making yourself smaller so someone else could be bigger? How many years swallowing your dreams, your ambitions, your truth, your pain? Because keeping the peace was more important than keeping yourself. You've been told that's love, that's devotion, that's what good women do. But let me tell you what it actually is. It's slow death. It's systematic erasure. It's allowing people who don't value you to consume your one precious life while you smile and say you're happy to help. And here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. It's not too late. I don't care if you're 45 or 55 or 65 or 75. I don't care if you've been married for 5 years or 50. I don't care if you have kids or grandkids who need you, or aging parents who depend on you, or a million responsibilities that feel impossible to walk away from. It's not too late to choose yourself. It's not too late to demand what you deserve. It's not too late to walk away from people who treat you like you're disposable. It's not too late to start over, rebuild, reclaim every piece of yourself you gave away thinking it was investment when it was actually theft. You're not too old. You're not too tired. You're not too far gone. You're just finally awake. And awake is absolutely terrifying to people who need you asleep, who need you compliant, who need you grateful for crumbs. Your age isn't a weakness. It's your secret weapon. You have decades of experience reading people, seeing patterns, understanding dynamics that younger people miss. You have patience refined by years of navigating complex situations. You have strategic thinking developed by managing households and relationships and crises. You have resources, connections, knowledge accumulated over a lifetime. You have emotional resilience forged by surviving things that would have broken someone with less history. And most powerful of all, you have the freedom that comes from reaching the age where you finally stop caring what people think. Stop seeking approval from people who will never give it. Stop trying to earn love from people who are fundamentally incapable of giving it. Use that power. Stop accepting disrespect disguised as love. Stop staying in situations that are destroying you because leaving feels scary or selfish or impossible. Stop protecting people who hurt you from the natural consequences of their actions. Stop being the supporting character in your own life story. You deserve better. Not someday when conditions are perfect. Not next year when you figure everything out. Now. Today. This moment. The life you deserve, the peace you deserve, the respect you deserve, the joy you deserve, it's all waiting for you on the other side of the fear of disappointing people who have never worried about disappointing you. I'm not special. I'm not extraordinary. I'm not some exception or unicorn. I'm just a woman who decided enough was enough, who got angry enough, hurt enough, betrayed enough that the pain of staying became worse than the fear of leaving, who chose herself when every voice around her said she should choose everyone else. And if I can rise from complete devastation, from total betrayal, from being erased and discarded and treated as disposable, if I can build a life better than anything I had before, so can you. The only difference between me right now living in freedom and you right now living in whatever situation has you watching this video at whatever hour of the night it is, the only difference is that I already started. But you can start today, right now, this second. The life you deserve is waiting. Go get it. If this story moved you, shook you, inspired you, or gave you ideas about your own situation and what you might be capable of doing, I need you to do 3 things right now before you click away. First, like this video. I'm serious. Hit that thumbs up right now so the algorithm shows this to more women who need to see it. Women who are suffering in silence right now, thinking they have no options, no power, no way out. Your like literally changes lives by making this discoverable. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications. And I mean all notifications, not just some, because next week I'm sharing the story of a 52-year-old grandmother who discovered her entire family had been planning secretly for 18 months to put her in a nursing home against her will so they could sell her house and split the money while she was still alive. And what she did when she found out will leave you absolutely speechless. It involves fake dementia, a private investigator, and a Thanksgiving dinner no one in that family will ever forget. You won't want to miss it. And third, most important, comment below and tell me, what was the exact moment you realized you deserved better? What was the thing someone did or said that finally made you see clearly that you were being taken advantage of, disrespected, or taken for granted? Because your story matters. Your voice matters. And this community is here to remind you that you're never too old, never too late, never too far gone to completely rewrite your ending. Share your moment in the comments right now. I read every single one, and so do thousands of other women who come here looking for solidarity and strength. Do all 3 things now, and I'll see you next week with another story of a woman who refused to stay down. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your emotions today. Now go take back your power.